Hello everyone and welcome to Newegg TV. My name is Paul. Today I'm going to be doing an unboxing and overview and also some benchmarks on this new SSD from Corsair. This is the Corsair Neutron GTX. I have the 240GB version here. It's also available in 120 and 480GB capacities. We'll start off with a closer look at the retail box, and if you're familiar with Corsair SSDs, you might be familiar with their Force series. The primary difference between the Force series and the Neutron here is the use of a different SSD controller inside. So this Neutron GTX uses a Link A media controller. It's called the LM87800, and the performance thus far, at least in my tests, has been quite impressive. This is a 7mm high drive, so it should fit in most laptops that can accommodate a 2.5-inch drive. It uses high endurance toggle NAND, which is high performance NAND flash memory. There's also a version called the Neutron GT, which uses Onfi NAND, which is the from the Intel Micron Flash Memory Alliance, or whichever that acronym is. I always forget how that goes. Anyway, you can get up to 90K IOPS for reads and up to 90K IOPS for writes. Very good read and write performance from this drive. Again, this is a 240GB capacity. There's a little bit more information here on the back, but that's about it. If you want to read over that thing, I'm going to go ahead and take this out of the box. Taking a look inside the box, we have a little bit of information about the warranty that's included with the SSD. You also get a 3.5-inch to 2.5-inch bay converter, so if you're using an older desktop system that has 3.5-inch drive bays, you should be able to use that to mount the SSD securely to that. Inside we have a clamshell with the SSD itself, of course, and screws so you can mount the SSD to that adapter and mount the adapter to your case. Here's a closer look at the SSD itself. As you can see, it's got a gray housing sticker right here with the drive information, which is black and red. The SSD itself is incredibly light. Actually, the PCB inside, which I'll show you in just a second, is very short. It doesn't even take up the whole length of the casing. Here at the back, we can see standard serial ATA, data, and power connectors. This is a SATA Revision 3 compatible SSD, so you can go SATA 6 gigabit per second connection right there. It is backwards compatible, of course, with SATA Rev 2, so you can install it in an older system, although you're not going to hit the same drive performance numbers that you're going to see in my benchmarks in just a few minutes here. Give me just a moment. I'm actually going to, I should point out from the side here, that's your 7mm thickness. And the housing is actually just held on by some little tabs here on the side. So let me pop those open and I'll show you the actual SSD PCB. So I've gone ahead and popped open the housing. There are 3 screws that hold the PCB in place. Bear in mind, if you are going to be opening up your SSD like this, you will void your manufacturer's warranty. So best not to try this at home unless you're sure that you don't need your warranty. On the opposite side of the PCB, we can see where most of the action is at. There is a thermal pad right there. That's on top of the Link A Media SSD controller, which is a rather large square chip right underneath that. It's an 8-channel controller. It can control up to 4 chips per channel. You have 8 NAND, toggle NAND modules scattered around right there. And that gives you 32 gigabytes or binary gigabytes per NAND package, which gives you a total binary unformatted capacity of 256 gigabytes. You also get a 256 megabyte DDR2 800 cache, so you get 128 megabyte chip right there, DDR2, and then another one on the opposite side. Since it's DDR, you do need 2 chips. So that's going to perform the caching for the drive. However, you might, if you look at SSDs much, you might think that, well, a lot of times if it actually has an onboard cache, they will give you more capacity. However, Corsair has simply set aside 12.7% of the space on this SSD, and that's reserved for wear leveling, bad block replacement, recycling, and garbage collection, which are some of the functions that the SSD might do over the life of the drive. And if you'd like more information, you can check out our SSD video, which we have on our Newegg YouTube channel. That said, I'm going to go ahead and head over to our test bed so we can take a look at this drive's performance. Taking a look at our benchmarks, and just so you guys know, we're on an X79 platform with the 3960X processor, and we're connecting to the native SATA Rev 3 controller from the X79 chipset. So we're starting off with AS SSD, which is a popular SSD benchmarking utility. This is the same test on the upper left here. It's just showing you read and write performance in megabytes per second on the left side and input-output operations per second on the right side. Overall score of 1054, which is pretty astounding for a single drive. Access times are sub less than 0.1 milliseconds, so 0.038 and 0.045 respectively for read and write. We hit peak sequential read and write speeds of 505 and 473 megabytes per second. Our 4K tests were at 341 and 272 megabytes per second. Input-output operations per second on that 4K test, 87,000 for read, 69,000 for write, so some pretty massive scores there from ASSSD. I also went ahead and ran the compression benchmark, so we can see here by these little lines going across the top of the chart. Hit very stable numbers in the just under 500 megabytes per second range for the writes and just over 500 megabytes per second for the reads. Finally, for our copy benchmark test for ISO programming games, and the values are right there. Next up, we're going to jump over to Crystal Disk Mark. And right here we can see our first test. This is running in compressible mode, so this is zero fill. And this does allow you to take advantage of drive compression for some SSDs, although this SSD doesn't really use drive compression, but I do like to show these numbers nonetheless. So reads and writes, we can see about 450 megabytes per second for reads, about 491 for writes. The 4K tests down here are pretty amazing, especially looking at the overall write speed, because write speeds are a place that SSDs have really taken had a lot of improvements. So the corresponding values over here on the left for input-output operations per second, we can see 88,900 and 85,100 for reads and writes in our 4K QDepth 32 test. I also ran this in default mode, which uses incompressible data, and there are the values there. Again, not a whole lot of difference here, simply because, again, this drive really doesn't do on-the-fly compression with the controller, so we're seeing roughly the same results with this test. Finally, I ran Atto, which is one of the benchmark utilities that is used most frequently by SSD manufacturers to show really how fast their drives can go. It runs a bunch of different transfer sizes, starting with the small ones over here, going all the way up to the large ones. And there's all the numbers. For writes, we hit a peak of about 516 megabytes per second. For the reads, we hit 563 megabytes per second on the larger transfer size tests up there. This is at QDepth 4. I also ran it at QDepth 10. There are the values for those right there. Pretty much the same, 517 and 561 megabytes per second. And that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Please bear in mind that the benchmarks I've shown you only apply to the 240 gigabyte version of this. You're going to have slightly varying performance depending on what capacity SSD you go with. But that's going to do it. Once again, this has been the Corsair Neutron GTX SSD, the 240 gigabyte version here, also available in 120 and 480 gigabyte capacities. I'm Paul with Newegg TV. If you enjoyed today's video, you can find more on our Newegg YouTube channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.